I'm now going to talk about Kimi 2022. This was awesome. I didn't expect this to be such an interesting film, but it was totally on my wavelength. It's set in Seattle, a city I remember well from visiting in 2007. I loved it. It really fits in with the battles we face in the 20s. Kimi is like Siri and Alexa, but with a USP that involves human interpretation. The main character, Angela Charles, played by Zoe Kravitz, is one of those human interpreters, and she lives in a really nice apartment in what looked like central Seattle. It seems to be set closer to the lockdown. Maybe it was filmed in 2020 or 21. There's a lot of people wearing masks, although the reason Angela does so might be just as much because of her anxiety and agoraphobia. One of the central themes of this film is the mental health crisis that so many people experience. I was blown away by her acting, thought it was brilliant. The chasms in communication that often exist between people of different generations, I wonder if that can be bridged by them seeing films like this. I'm not sure. I found it quite heartbreaking at certain points. The struggle she faced to even get to open her front door. That was really poignant, really chimed, really struck me. I felt so much for her, even though my experiences haven't been quite like that, fortunately. I think I may have experienced some levels of agoraphobia in public places, but nothing like this level, and yet I could absolutely empathise in such an amazing way during those scenes. She seems to have some obsessional compulsive disorder, OCD. She often uses hand gel, observing how she waved her hands to dry them after using hand gel. I've never seen anyone do that before. I suppose if you're using it all the time, maybe that's what you would do. It's heartbreaking in some ways, those early scenes. Also, the 0 hours culture, the hyper-monitoring of work performance, gosh, that chimed with me as well. The timestamps of every element of output. Wow, any of us who've experienced that in our working environment would understand how difficult it is when computers, everything is observed. Going back to her apartment, it's almost like a fish tank, fish bowl. She doesn't seem to have curtains. Some of the other residents opposite do, but people can look in. Perhaps that's partly choice, but there's a scene early on. There's this guy who's watching people with binoculars. It's super creepy AF. What? But anyway, things don't necessarily develop as you expect. There's some dark humour as well. There's some elements that you think, oh gosh. But the whole thing about lockdowns and working at home, the CEO of the company who is interviewed at the start of the film is selling the advantages of Kimi. When he finishes a brief interview, you can see he's wearing pyjama bottoms. It's just like lockdown at its height in 2020. People working in their pyjamas when they weren't on camera, and I don't know, it's amusing. And I can imagine in a few years' time there are plenty of signs around, still permanent signs on footpaths saying keep 2 meters apart, stamped into the ground. I can imagine the next generation of young people as they grow older, what's all this about? But getting back to the film, Darius, a Romanian tech worker, makes a Me Too quip because he fancies Angela. I was wondering if it might become unnecessarily graphic. I thought at one stage it possibly might, but I would say no. Most of the violence is not shown. It's certainly not as bad as films like Watcher, which I was warming to in some respects, and then didn't like some elements of it. The only caution would be, I would say, is everyone has their own levels on what's acceptable. People who experience PTSD, but I'd say I didn't notice anything worse than what appears in the trailer. I absolutely loved it. The acting was top-notch. I'm hesitating a little there. I felt it was, but I've only experienced certain levels of anxiety, and perhaps others would judge it differently. But I think Zoe Zoe Kravitz was amazing. Angela seems to overcome barriers. When you have a greater purpose, you often can. Oh, about mask wearing, I suppose it's relatively rare now. We've got beyond the worst excesses of COVID. But this film demonstrates clearly why it is always important to respect people who choose to cover their faces. Some people want almost to be invisible. I remember a friend who was going through such a phase where they were wearing camouflage style clothing. They just did not want to be noticed. And the body language of Angela in the outside world, it's sadly not too different often from a school playground. I mean, the scenes where Barbie and Ken reach the real world is another example, because people can react with meanness quite mercilessly towards anyone who's different. They will scorn and effectively bully those who try to hide, as well as if they notice anything different about that person. In this case with Angela, there are extra reasons why people try not to be noticed, use masks as a tool to help threats. I mean, she perceives the outside world as a threat. Suffice to say that she comes across a worrying audio file. She's doing social media monitoring effectively. She needs to report this, and it's a difficult process. I won't say any more than that. I think the trailer gives away more than that, and that is problematic. I didn't watch the trailer, but I found it an awesome film. I'd actually score this 9.5 out of 10. It was a surprise. I wasn't expecting it to be the highest scoring film so far this year. I talked about Rules of Attraction. I gave that a similar high score, but it's fairly rare for me to give a 9.5. I loved the soundtrack as well, Elastica, and the classical music. All the elements of music in it, I really liked. That sense of foreboding in some of the music. The whole mood. Yeah, I really liked it. And at the title was the end. I saw who was behind the film, Steven Soderbergh. He's awesome. It's another great work from him. I loved it. That's all I've got to say about it. But I'd love to know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.